This is Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. We're back with, I think, probably one of the most delightful conversations that I've had with any executive in any business on our program. But Ricky Dickson, who is the former CEO and president of Bluebell Ice Cream, or Bluebell Creameries, I guess is the technical legal name. But you also just wrote a wonderful book, One Scoop at a Time. And in your book, it's just a delightful conversation. I think in our last program, when we were on the last time, I mentioned Jack Welch. And Jack Welch did a great job in his book from 30-something years ago that gave really insightful stories about the experience. And I found those stories, for me as a young leader, more critical to my development than maybe some of the more technical business components. But you were in the last program, you were discussing one possible story that was your I Love Lucy moment when you moved to one of your manufacturing facilities. I'd love to start with that story as we begin this podcast, but welcome back, first of all,
thank
to
you
Business
again for
Decoded.
having me back. This is great. Thank you.
So the I Love Lucy episode, of course, with the chocolate. Who doesn't remember and love that?
Yeah. And ironically, I'm Ricky, so it fits nicely with I Love Lucy.
I still don't know if I can say that with Vita, Veggie, Vitamin.
Absolutely.
So
good.
What was your I Love Lucy moment?
Well, it's a fun story, and it is in the book, but at the same time, it's small, so there's a lot more in the book than just this, obviously. But I had just been promoted or asked, I would say, to leave the sales side of things. I'd been in the sales department for 17 years.
Right. We
had an opening to run our manufacturing plant in Broken Arrow. Bluebell has today 3 different manufacturing plants. Our main headquarters in Brenham, Texas, between Houston and Austin, and then Sylacauga, Alabama. And then the third is Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And so when the opening came, they said, would you mind stepping into the role of general manager of the plant? And we'll continue to see and make a decision who should be the general manager. So it was a fun experience to say, okay, you want me to what? But I love people and I love to get involved. And so I thought, the first thing I need to do is make sure that they understand I'm not going to sit up in some ivory tower. I'm not going to sit in my office all day. I'm going to engage with the employees. And so that was probably the most smartest business decisions I made, because I love people and I want to know what you do. I want to understand. So when you come to me with a problem, I'm there with you and not just trying to figure out what makes sense.
Ricky, don't lose your place, but No, that's incredible. But it reminded me of when I was in California working for a company. We had a big manufacturing plant nearby and then our corporate office. I assigned, so HR rolled up to me. I assigned one of our HR people to that facility because the manufacturing facility just sort of felt left out. They didn't feel part of the culture and the dynamic. They didn't feel the energy that we had in our main office, where we had marketing and engineering, some of our other corporate people. But I did the same thing. Not only did I put someone there, but I was at our manufacturing plant a lot. One, I thought the employees deserved it. Like you just mentioned, I wanted them to see me out of the office.
Right.
And that I was willing to learn what they did. Now, I wasn't technically proficient in what they did, but they understood and appreciated that I was trying to learn what they did, and they related to it. And then I had a couple of events with them that they just felt really engaged and appreciated. I had like a corporate Olympics, and we were playing different games, but they loved it. And it helped to build that rapport. And so whenever we had a potential issue in a plant, we were the first that they called to say that this is taking place because they trusted us. And it sounds like you were doing the same thing in your plant. Sorry to interrupt you there, but
and I think
it's just such an important point for leaders. I was watching this one program, and it was about a retail company, and the CEO was a finance guy. He had never been out of finance before taking the CEO role, and had never visited one of their retail locations. And I thought that is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you took a more hands-on approach, which is exciting.
Absolutely. In fact, I'll fast forward real quick. When Undercover Boss called a couple of different times to say, would I be willing to, we had to pretty much decline because I had been in not just the plant, but also
they knew you.
Every single one of our branches throughout the country. So,
but they do pretty well with their wigs.
Yeah,
and all
they do. The fake beard may have been a help, and it would have been a lot of fun. But at the same time, I think that you're exactly right. Mm-hmm. I think that as a leader, you can talk the talk, but if you don't walk a walk.
Right.
And they watch.
They do.
And so I wanted them to be able to realize that I'm approachable, that you can ask me anything at any time. I had an employee walk up one time and said, I didn't like my raise. And I looked at him and said, I didn't like it either. And they looked back at me and I go, now what are you going to do to fix it? Right. And then, okay. And I said, look, I really, we need to get you to the right person. Right. But the fact they had that freedom to approach. Right. I will, if they, as long as they do it respectfully. Right. And I, again, want to. So let's get back to I Love Lucy. I think it was the very first day. I'm going to go down on production floor, and I'm just going to walk from one end to the next. I'm going to meet people. I'm going to, because I'd been in the sell side, so even though I'd been in the location. So I wanted to replace somebody for about a 15-minute window. And I looked at the first operation. We were making half gallons, and they come out about 50 a minute. And I thought, I probably
50 a minute?
Yeah, 50 a minute. You have two people are grabbing 4 at a time, putting them in a sleeve, and then
are they half gallons or what?
Half-gallon containers.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, they're coming at a rate, and they keep coming. I mean,
oh my gosh!
And so I
50
thought,
a minute.
50. Now you have two people, but still, it looks simple because they make it look simple. So I passed on that, and I went to the next line, and I think I can't even remember, these little cups, and you got to put 3 dozen into a bag, and there's a way to do it, but they just slide right in, and I'm thinking, no way, I'm going to try that. So I get to the third operation, and I look over, and it's sherbet quartz. Okay. And so they put these 6 sherbet quartz in a box, and they put it up on standing up and down, and you have this packager, and they rotate, but the packager gets the box, and they grab tape, and all they do is put the tape on the box, take the box, and put it on the conveyor. Right. And I'm thinking, I've done Christmas. I've done, I'm not the best rapper, but I can do tape. Right. So I walk up to the individual, and I said, today's your lucky day. I'm Ricky Dickson, and I know you don't know who I am, but today's your lucky day. You're going to get a 15-minute break that's, on me. I love it. So go up. Just enjoy your time. Come back in 15 minutes. Don't leave me down here. But I'm going to take your spot for 15 minutes. And so and there she went. So I get the first box, and I put the tape on it. Now, you have to get inside my mindset. Yes. And I put the box on the conveyor, and I turn and I watch that box go down the conveyor as it's going to cold storage. And I'm thinking, that's the best tape box in the history of mankind. And my counterparts on the other end, when they get this box, are going to see this is one, that whatever. And when I turn, I have 6 boxes now waiting on me. And so I'm taping as quick as I can, and I finally get to a point where I'm finally caught back up. It's right at the 15-minute mark. Nice. There's a little seat that you can sit on. Now, at this point, I'm standing because I'm just trying to catch up. And I sit down, and I pull the box, and I pull it too far, and it comes open. Oh, no. And the 6 cords fall on the ground, and they're rolling around, and the whole team is just dying laughing. And I'm thinking, this couldn't have happened at a better time to show them that I'm human. I'm willing to try, but at the same time, don't try this at home. Right. leave this to the experts. The packager came back. I thanked her for coming back. And I decided at this point, visiting's one thing, but let them do their part. But luckily I didn't have to sit there and eat the ice cream. That would have been not like the chocolate.
I do think, though, what happens at that moment, not only do they build an appreciation for you, but the same is the case that you build an appreciation for what they do. Yeah. Sometimes when you get into that executive office, we begin to make decisions that ultimately might not suit that specific worker well, because we don't understand what they do. And you took a moment to understand that it's not as easy as it seems.
That's right.
They make it look easy.
Yeah, there's a fine line of knowing when to and when not to. And at the same time, I'm a believer in empathy, not necessarily sympathy. And I know that sounds on the bad side of things, but if I can just get to where I can understand you, then when you come with suggestions, I can be able to embrace those in a way that I couldn't if I hadn't have come down there. So
Ricky, I'm still amazed. You spent 43 years at one company. Today, it seems like people move a little bit more regularly. And I think there is an opportunity for people to understand how to figure out a way to survive at a company that long, giving it a shot, working your way up. There's just some value to that.
No question. I think that why I would say the 43 years I was able to make it that long. And ironically, we have this list of employees of how many years they've been with Bluebell. At the beginning of every year, we look at it. And when I retired, like say, it was a little over 43 years. I was number 33 on that list.
Oh, wow.
So there were 32 employees that actually had been with the company longer than 43 years.
That is incredible.
And I think 25% of Bluebell, now this is a stat that's a couple of years old, but 25% had been with Bluebell for over 20 years or longer. Amazing. So I go back to that family environment. And when you understand the vision and can lock into I have a phrase that I love to say. It's a little, I won't say technical, but our job is to consistently meet the expectation that drives the passion. People have a passion for the ice cream, but they also have an expectation when they take home that homemade vanilla or cookies and cream. So every time they eat that bite from that new carton, I want it to fulfill and or meet or exceed that expectation. And when you have 3 manufacturing plants, you want to make sure all 3 are on that same page. So,
I was watching a documentary recently about Twitter, a series. And Jack Dorsey is one of the founders of Twitter. And I've mentioned this to a few other people. A lot of times in those companies that are growing from those early days, the founders often don't make it for very long. I think in his case, they mentioned that he just didn't have the leadership personality skills to lead the team. And I don't know the full detail. But you just mentioned something, though, that I just think is incredible to learn. And that's how do you build that rapport? How do you groom people, prepare people to grow? How do you get people invested so that they are staying 20 plus years, as you mentioned, 25%? And I presume that's not easy. But what's kind of your thought and philosophy? I know you mentioned some of that just a moment ago, but I'd love for you to kind of vet that out a little for us and tell us what does it take to build that kind of commitment from employees, such that they're staying for 20, 43 years?
Yeah, I think it starts with the overall culture for sure. I think it also can zoom in on if this isn't for you, it's okay. Because you want them to be, again, I think I mentioned earlier that you want them to be where they should be, that they're the most, the rewarding from, and again, some positions, it may be rewarding to some and not necessarily rewarding to others. But I think, though, the way you treat them and the way you embrace them, and I think you never stop learning. I think in leadership, you're learning what that means because today's employee is different from yesterday's. If you look back 30 and 40 years, that you didn't think about changing jobs. You went to work. I mean, I went to work for Bluebell Creameries. Period. I never thought about in 10 years I may try this. But I think that, let me add one thing and I'll come back.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that I'm not saying that everybody's, you want to make sure that the ones that aren't performing, you react immediately. Because a lot of times you want to stay with them, and it's just not in their skill set. So you want to be an encourager to why don't you get to where, you're going to be happy and we're going to be happy. So I'm not saying everybody that came through the door, look, we're going to make this work, period. But you listen and you learn along that way. But it's the culture that you establish. And with 66 branches that we have throughout the country, every one of those branches create and have their own culture, but you hope it mirrors the same culture that's at the corporate office.
Now, I was looking at some of the notes about your book and kind of the premise, and one of the items that stood out is a note that amid the surprises, decisions, successes, and difficulties, how does a person find their way forward? And one of the items you mentioned to me before we began recording the program was helping to promote someone. You notice that they have a great skill set, that they're a good person, you promote them, and maybe that position didn't work out. But what you did that I think is critical, that all leaders should understand, at that point, you still stand by those employees. You may find another position because you know that they're a good person, maybe just misplaced in the position. And I thought what you mentioned was just incredible about that premise of helping them find a different spot, but you stayed with them. I think sometimes people might leave because they're afraid that you might not stand by them, that they didn't perform in that role, and they're maybe a little embarrassed about their performance in that role, and they're afraid to say it's not working, so they leave. But you have examples of putting people in another role so they can achieve success and be happy.
Moving back was, always on the forefront. And we've had, I won't say a whole lot, but we've had quite a few individuals that took a promotion and it just wasn't what they were either expecting, or they did it because it's, either want to be more money or pride or whatever that driving factor is. But when you look at them and say, this isn't working, why don't we get you where it was working before? Because whatever you were doing, we saw that good in you.
Exactly.
And so, we would put them back, and then they were happy again, and they were performing. And pride is an unfortunate thing in all of us.
It is.
And if we can get past the pride and say, look, when I go home at the end of the day, if I can see job well done, I enjoyed what I did today, and go to home and my family life's going to be better. Right. It's a win-win.
It is.
So, Yeah,
identifying that talent is neat. I tell you, I try not to give too many of my stories because you have such an amazing experience. But I had one of the people on my team who was a manager leading an operation. I had a call from a recruiter saying, Ronnie, you should consider this one position at a different company. And I wasn't ready to leave that organization. But I thought, I have someone who is incredible. So she was on my team, and I recommended her for the position. But I spoke to her. I said, you're ready? She said, Ronnie, no, I'm not ready. I said, look, when I look at other people in other positions at this next level role that you're looking at, they're not as good as you. Realize you're not ready to go, but you're ready to run this operation. So she applied for it, and she ended up getting it. She was running the entire operation for a nationally based company and did an incredible job. But I tell people this story because sometimes managers and leaders, they don't want their key people to leave. Mm-hmm. And I thought she needed to go and really experience and build her own program. Not that I wanted her to leave the company, but just to be able to find and identify that talent and do what you can to help them succeed is just so important.
Absolutely. Okay. And I think, too, when you're leading employees, especially in your immediate circle, is to ask ahead of time, what do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? And then if they share, I see myself possibly moving up. I've learned through some of the gentlemen that I've worked with. There was one actually in Fort Worth that said, I'm so glad you told me that because today I can't recommend you. But this is what I'll do. I will help you to achieve that goal if we can work together. So they find out ahead of time, wow, I didn't know that. I thought I was doing the things I should be doing, but I'm not. But that way they can build that together. Right. And there's a communication, so it's not a sudden, why didn't I get promoted? Right. And, well, I didn't even know you wanted to move up. Well, you have that dialogue, and a lot of times we don't ask, and we should be asking, what do you aspire to be? What do you that was a question that was asked me when I first started. Where do you see yourself in 25 years with Bluebell?
What'd you say that?
I honestly don't remember. My thought at the time is, I just hope I still have my own truck and get to play my own music as I go through the neighborhoods. I'm kidding. I didn't know what I would even be doing. But in all honesty, at that time, I'm sure from a pride standpoint, it was just, go as far as you can go. But that Oklahoma moment where I just want to, again, have that passion when I go into work that I can be all I can be. Right. Not for my glory, but for God's.
Now, and I may have this wrong, when you were growing up, did you deliver newspapers, lemonade stand or something?
No, it's a great question. My real job was either mowing yards or what I tell people, my first job was selling cold drinks at the Hemisphere Arena for the San Antonio Spurs, mainly because I ran track, and it was a great way to go up and down all the steps. And so, that when I started with Bluebell, I was out of mind sharing. It was $1,000 a month. Wow. And I thought I'd hit pay dirt. I thought, man, of course it's 1981, but still. And I got my first check, and I still have it framed, by the way.
Oh, you do?
It was $362 and some change. And I called my dad, and I said, they told me they're going to pay me $1,000 a month. They're paying me every other week. Oh, wow. That's $500 every other week. And he goes, well, number one, son, when you get paid every week, there's 26 pay periods. Shows you where I was at. Hopefully I've come a long way. But the other thing, he says there's a thing called taxes. And I was blessed. I did work in college for an ad agency and also for the paper, but for I won't say minimum wage.
I thought there was a connection there, if I remember the newspaper.
The advertising agency and again working for the Baylor paper. Sure. Yes, I produced and created ads for the paper itself in Waco.
Okay,
so
that's amazing. So, in your book, I think there was a story in there about you donating ice cream for a memorial service. You mind telling that story?
Yes. It's a great story, and I think you'll get a lot more color from it in the story if you were to read it. But we have had so many different opportunities to share ice cream. And as I mentioned before, we make what I feel like is the best ice cream in the country, but maybe a little on the bias side, but absolutely love what we make. But what we do is make memories. And so when we think of ice cream, it usually will take you to some memory of some kind, whether it be with your grandparents. For me, it was at home, cranking it out, on the old crank until we had Bluebell. In this case, there was a sister that called right at the end of the year. It was December 28th at 4:30 in the afternoon, and really the call was kind of a frantic one. And that this individual sister it was on her final days. She had cancer, and it was back. And she had two wishes. One was to make it to her 59th birthday, which was the following Monday. Okay. And then the second was when she did pass, that they would have Bluebell ice cream. Wow. At her celebration of life. And so we immediately got on the phone, made some phone calls, and were able to be able to work that out. But the neat part of that story was it hit Facebook, which was great. The whole thing about just her love for Bluebell and her really devotion to her sister. Right. But she wanted wooden spoons at the service. Oh wow! And so my administrative assistant called her back and to check on her, and she said, "I've got to ask you this question. Why the wooden spoons?" Right. And she said, I wanted to print on there Psalms 34:8, taste the goodness of the Lord. Taste and see the goodness of the Lord. I'm in the ballpark. Yes. I need to get that totally to memory. But the fact that she put that on there in a celebration that Bluebell meant that much. But again, it was more than Bluebell. It was just part of her fabric. Right. And that story went all over I don't know how many countries it ended up. It's in the book. It's just a wonderful story. It drove home to me the fact that it is more than just ice cream and the responsibility that comes with it.
And you're right so food in general is a great way for us to get together and to share time. And that's why Thanksgiving for me is just so incredible. It's just all of my favorites, from the mashed potatoes and the turkey and the gravy. Not a cranberries fan that much, but I had some homemade cranberry a couple years ago. It was incredible. You're in. But then the ice cream with the apple pie or the sweet potato pie is just delightful. Did you bring food with you, by the way? I'm getting hungry now. Too.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Thanksgiving because I have a chapter on it's 3 different quick stories on turkeys, and one of them is the turkey, which is the centerpiece of the celebration of Thanksgiving. And so definitely one that I enjoyed writing and not necessarily enjoyed reading. Part of that story was I was kind of attacked by a wild turkey in our neighborhood. Oh, so no. You'll have to read it. It's a fun story. It all ended well. Okay. But at the same time, it's interesting you brought Thanksgiving because that's exactly what the purpose behind it is.
So I don't know the difference with the wild turkey, but I was with a guy just a few weeks ago who's from South Africa. And he showed me his injury from being attacked by an alligator. So I'm not sure which one I would take.
I would rather probably have the turkey. Although in this case, my beautiful bride, who happens to be sitting right here beside me, came to my rescue. Okay. And it was very humbling. And we laugh about it now. But we live kind of out in the country, and turkeys do come and go. And I made the mistake of trying to talk to one, and what I said probably didn't go over very well. Okay, I learned later it was mating season, and I was a threat to him, I guess is the best way of saying it. So
very interesting.
We got close and up front, and pretty foul, if I could make a turkey joke in there somehow.
So I know we spoke about this, but if you don't mind, tell me about your spouse. I know that you've been together for a while, and I mentioned to you off air that spouses can make the biggest difference as a leader. They have a grounding force, and I think in many ways it gives us the freedom to go out in the rest of the world and just work hard because we have a purpose and a need and a value.
Yeah, absolutely. She's sitting here, so I have to make sure I do this right. But no, she's been my biggest cheerleader through really, when you... We're a blended family, and when I remember calling her and telling her we're leaving Oklahoma, we were in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and we're now going to move down to Brenham. and at the same time are becoming empty nesters.
Right.
That's a tough discussion to have. But, you know, for 20 years, we lived there in Brenham. She was by far the biggest supporter. And she may have complained, but I don't remember it. Right. She was very, very supportive. And so today, because of that, we now live in Oklahoma City, where 4 of our 8 grandchildren are. And, you know, we come back to Dallas the most we can. The other 4 are here in Dallas. But no, she's been my rock. There's no question. And you can't do this without that support. I like to tell people there are seasons. And so when you're in that season of difficulty, especially whether it be at work or at home, but if you're at work and you're demanding from others their time that's outside the realm, to not forget that. So when you get into the seasons when things are back to normal, take time to give yourself to the family, because it's critical in the overall makeup. I mean, profits, we can talk profits all day, but to me, that's secondary. If you're doing what you do and you love doing it, and yes, you've got to make money to stay going. There's no question. Absolutely. But she's been incredibly supportive.
I admire it, because I think sometimes when we talk about business, we forget that family side of it, which is so critical to us succeeding and doing well. And the fact that she's here in studio doing this taping, and she's traveled with you for these kind of programs. I saw you in an event not long ago, and she was right there by your side. It makes a difference.
No question.
So for all those business leaders listening in, family's important. You know, you might have the big CEO and president of an organization, but we're human, you're human. That's right. And that family makes a difference. So you mentioned a crank machine, and I wanted to go back to this before we run out of time. I remember I had the big wooden ice cream machine with the interior, and putting the rocks in there, the ice, and then the salt and churning. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Before they made it electric, right?
Yeah, it was before electric. And you know, when you were little, you would actually even sit on it. Mom would have a paper like a dish rag or a towel on top to keep the ice from melting. And you would sit and you would crank. And the key to it, you wanted to be early in the cranking because it was liquid. But then you also wanted to be there at the last, because when Mom would say, "Okay, I think it's finished," whoever was on the crank got to eat off the blades. The dasher. The dasher's what's inside turning the ice cream. And man, to be able to be the first to pull that dasher out, and that was yours. So, you know, we'd be kind of fighting. No, it's my turn. No, not yet, not yet.
Did you have a certain number of cranks that you could only do? And then by the 6th crank, it was somebody else's time.
I don't remember, but what's neat is it pulled the family together too.
It did.
And, you know, when you're doing something together like that as a family, though, those are opportunities that today it seems like we've lost.
We had the same thing with making cakes, and when you're whisking the cake, the one that gets to lick the whisk.
Absolutely, yes. You know exactly what I mean.
I do.
Yeah.
So important.
It just tastes exceptionally.
And, you know, it's funny because it does. It tastes better than the actual cake. Just it's the experience of licking that spoon or that whisk at the end.
That's right.
So, Ricky, tell me about your book and your final thoughts and messages for business people that are looking to become the next Ricky and lead an organization with the kind of glory, if you will, and history and dynamics of a Blue Bell. It's just such an American Texas brand that the idea of being able to lead a company like that is amazing.
There's no question. Probably, if not the most humble thing, right up there. We talked earlier about when did you aspire one day to become president? Because the Cruzy family had the legacy of running the company for almost 100 years. That part really wasn't in my mind and mainstay. When I became vice president of sales and marketing and becoming over the advertising, that was my sweet spot. I felt like, okay, I just absolutely loved it. I love being president as well, but it was a totally different a world that came. The book, one scoop at a time, it really it'll take you on that journey. There's stories in there about going hunting with my dad, just the experience of being with my father. There's some stories about my wife and I and some trips that we took that show the realness and the rawness of life, but in a fun way. But really, it's stories and lessons turning fear into faith. And how do you get to a place in the middle of a storm that you can have peace? I've always been fascinated with the Mark chapter 4 in the Bible, talking about Jesus going to the front of the boat, and they're going across the sea, and then the waves come and they come and wake him up, and how he's able to sleep, I never will be able to understand that, but he is the creator of the universe.
Absolutely.
But if he can, and he is the creator, then I want to be able to have that same kind of peace. And so I would say, it's about how we pick flavors and how we go into markets. It's about ice cream in general. But the undercurrent of the whole book really is what I hope is how do you have peace in the middle of the storm, or stories and lessons turning fear into faith, one scoop at a time. And so, and I'd stay faithful to it and give it all you have, and allow God to move in a way that when you can see his footprints, or better yet, if you know you're in his hands, you can get through anything.
Well, I hope that people take the opportunity to go find your book and really learn and embrace the stories that you're telling, because I think the stories, as I mentioned earlier, I do so much more learning from those stories than just that only academic approach. I want to know how you did what you did and why you did what you did, what was going through your mind. And there's some amazing stories in your book that hopefully gives people a lot of great business insight.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's on Amazon. You can go to onescoopatatime.com. There's Ricky Dickson. .com. So there's a variety of ways to get to it, but thank you for the opportunity to be able to share, because it was a lot of fun to write.
I appreciate you making the drive from Oklahoma to join us.
You bet.
Great.
Not too far.
That's true. Thank you for joining us on Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share, and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.